My girlfriend is a very traditional rich girl. She never lets me touch a single finger of hers, to gain her father's approval. I left my hometown and traveled overseas to do research. Before I left, Willow promised that when I came back, she would agree to marry me. So, as the Liu Group was on the verge of bankruptcy, I gave all my research results to my future father-in-law without holding anything back, trying to prop up the crumbling foundation. However, when I returned home, eager to marry Willow, I discovered that she had gotten together with my substitute. I had planned to sever all ties with her and go our separate ways, but later, I learned the shocking truth. She had already given her body to Makoto during our relationship, and even practiced the splits for him. So now, I've changed my mind. I must make her fall into the abyss. Chapter 1. My friend sighed and said, "Turns out, a woman can change her heart in just a year." They were all upset on my behalf. Today was my welcome home banquet. After being abroad for a year, I practically rushed back without stopping, but they told me Willow had a new boyfriend. When I saw that man, I felt an indescribable ache in my heart. The first time I saw him was in a photo. It was sent by Willow when I had just left for abroad. She said, "I thought it was you." I joked with her. "What, you miss me?" She replied. "Yeah, I miss you." I called the wrong person, and he looked so confused. The back view in the photo looked so much like mine. Later, one day, Willow suddenly told me, "Let's just be friends." I asked, "Why?" She said, "I'm afraid you'll waste time on me and delay your studies. We can talk when you come back." Because of this, I worked day and night to finish my thesis and ended my studies abroad, but it wasn't until tonight that I found out she had a boyfriend. His name is Makoto. He's Willow's senior. Chapter 2. While we were talking, Willow walked back from the restroom, arm in arm with Makoto. Her lips were swollen, and she had just reapplied her lipstick, as if trying to cover something up. Her eyes were watery. Everyone exchanged knowing looks. She had been gone for so long, it couldn't have just been a simple trip to the bathroom. Makoto smiled lightly, saying, "Sorry, Willow's a bit soft-hearted. I had to stay with her." This scene stung my eyes, and I quickly lowered my head. The people who were still supporting me just moments ago suddenly changed their tone, saying, "Spoiling your wife, we get it. It's only right." One of Willow's friends joked, "Willow, you have to treat Makoto well. Look how considerate he is. He's always been there for you when things were tough. A warm-hearted guy like him is hard to find. Much better than someone who runs away to the other side of the world." I silently sipped my tea, feeling a bitter taste in my mouth. To them, it seemed like I had abandoned Willow, but only Willow knew why I had gone abroad to study in a foreign land. Makoto noticed me and, with a teasing tone, said to Willow, "He really looks a lot like me. I'm not his substitute, am I?" Willow pursed her lips and replied, "Stop making stuff up. Look at him, all messy. He's nothing like you." Makoto's eyes glinted with amusement, and he laughed even more, as if he found her reaction adorable. He said, "Keep it down. You really do have a sharp tongue." The conversation shifted, and people started talking about me. Someone asked, "I heard you finished a 3-year course in just 2 years. I also heard you were hospitalized recently. What happened?" My smile was somewhat forced as I replied, "I was just in a rush to come back. Didn't have time to eat. Had some stomach issues, but it's nothing. Just need some rest." Everyone subtly observed Willow's reaction. She had her head lowered, focused on eating the crab meat that Makoto had peeled for her. She looked like she didn't even hear the conversation. Come to think of it, I had been with Willow for more than 8 years. From kindergarten, when she'd wait by the window to pack my school bag, to high school, where we were still so innocent and naive, and then through university. We had been together for so long. Willow, the rich girl, had gone from waiting for me under my office building after work to becoming a constant presence in my life, like a loyal stone waiting for her husband. Everyone thought we would be together forever. But now, Willow was wearing a new couple's ring, holding hands with another man. Makoto's curious eyes kept scanning me. Just when everyone thought we would let things be, he suddenly asked, "Hey man, how did you and her break up?" The room went silent. Willow pouted and said, "I've told you before. Why ask again?" Makoto chuckled. "I just wanted to get to know you from a different angle." I turned my eyes away, and answered casually, "People change, like their tastes. Isn't it normal that she likes you now?" He glanced at Willow. A tinge of guilt flashed across his face. He said, "I didn't mean anything by it. I just..." For the first time tonight, Willow looked at me. Her gaze was cold, and her tone carried a faint warning as she said, "George, don't do this." To her, even my simple responses seemed like a provocation toward Makoto. This atmosphere made me uncomfortable. I put down my napkin and stood up, saying, "Excuse me, I'm going to the restroom." Leaving the private room, I felt completely drained, as if all my energy had been sucked out. No one had told me she had found someone else. Just 2 months ago, I sent Willow a message saying, I'm coming back to China, she had replied. Welcome back. In the restroom, there was an odd, ambiguous scent in the air. I leaned against the sink, turned on the faucet. My emotions were so suffocating that I wanted to vent them out, but I knew they were just a normal couple now. Once you break up, there's no reason to linger. Suddenly, the restroom door opened. A voice came through. Sorry, Willow left her lipstick here. I'm just coming to get it. It was Makoto. He saw me in a vulnerable state, stood frozen for a while, then stammered awkwardly, trying to cover up. We didn't do anything. The tissue in the trash can, the lipstick on the counter, the handprints on the mirror, too big, too small. All of these were reminders of what had happened. But he still insisted on ripping the curtain open, making it even more awkward for me. I took a deep breath, moved aside to give him space to take the lipstick. Makoto, however, stayed in front of the mirror, inspecting the sink. He sighed. We were in a rush earlier. I'm the kind of person who's a bit careless. I don't even know if I broke something. Then, he looked up at the mirror and, with some regret, said, Bro, do you have any tissues? I want to wipe off the marks. It'd be so embarrassing if someone saw this. He kept acting regretful, but was firmly declaring his ownership. I said nothing and turned around, walking out. Chapter 3. When Makoto entered the room behind me, he looked defeated, like he had been humiliated. Willow hurriedly pulled Makoto's arm, inspecting him closely. Furrowing her brows, she asked, Makoto, what did George say to you? Did he bully you again? One of her friends stood up and said, George, don't be too much. Makoto and Willow have been through so much together. Why should he step aside just because you came back? These words finally ignited my anger. I gritted my teeth and asked, Have you said enough? She replied, What do you mean? I looked up, suppressing my trembling lips, and said, Don't you want to know what we talked about in the restroom? He just said that when he was with you in there, he was so rough that he left marks everywhere and needs to clean them up. Everyone in the room showed disgust on their faces. Makoto's face went pale, and he shouted, Shut up. I was shaking with rage and said, Willow, if your Liu family didn't benefit from my research, you could scold me, but you have no right to. I clenched my fists, raising my voice. Miss Liu, do you understand what I'm saying? I exploded with anger. In front of everyone, I slammed my chopsticks and smashed the bowl. Everyone froze in shock. Makoto stood there, speechless, rooted to the spot. Willow, frightened, shrank into his arms, looking pitiful. As I stormed out, one of Willow's friends shouted, Willow, good thing you didn't stay with him. His temper's gotten so bad. I walked out with a cold expression, not pausing for a second. The rainy season had passed, and the cold air had swept through the city. I stood by the roadside, receiving a phone call. After picking up, there was a few seconds of silence. Then, a soft and pleasant female voice came through the receiver, asking, Is everything going well? Suddenly, I felt like a dam had burst. I sighed and said, Prof, I'm so sorry. During my brief time studying abroad, if I had to name one person who left the deepest impression on me, it would be my professor, Anna. She was only 30, yet she was already the youngest female professor at MO Medical Center. She was highly accomplished in the field of biomedical sciences. Once, we had a fierce argument about my return to China. Anna had said in a very cold tone, George, I've always admired you, and while I shouldn't interfere with your personal life, you have such a bright future ahead of you. It seems foolish to end your studies early. Your research should not stop here. But I still came back. With reckless courage, I hit a dead end. I had prepared myself to accept mockery. Anna said, I'm about to take off. Let's talk when I land. I asked, Where are you going? She chuckled lightly and said, There's an academic conference in your city tomorrow. She continued, George, everyone makes mistakes. You can choose to keep going down the wrong path, or you can get back on track. I hope to see you there tomorrow. I looked at the night sky, imagining what she must have looked like when she said those words. Graceful, intelligent, elegant. I rubbed my throbbing temple, my voice hoarse. I understand, Professor. I rented an apartment in the city center, in the same neighborhood as Willow. At first, I thought it would bring us closer, but now, it had become the most uncomfortable place for me. When Willow's friend called me, I was just pulling the curtains shut. It was a strange coincidence that from my window, I could see directly into Willow's living room. At that moment, there were two people standing by the window. Willow, like a willow branch, was leaning softly into Makoto's arms. The curtain swayed, their necks intertwined, sharing a tender moment. On the phone, Willow's friend was still ranting, saying, George, now that you've broken up, stop being so clingy. It's really pathetic. Just move out already, and stop bothering them. Makoto is so much better than you. He's more considerate, more responsible, more composed. Think about where you fall short. Honestly, I wasn't interested in arguing with her, but if she insisted on being petty, I interrupted. You wouldn't happen to like Makoto, would you? She asked. What are you talking about? I replied. You wouldn't happen to like your friend's boyfriend, would you? I saw them kissing. Do you want to see? Willow's friend suddenly froze, and then, as if her shame had been exposed, she cursed. George, are you crazy? She angrily hung up, and when I tried to call back to say a few more words, I found that I had been blocked. It was so laughable. Chapter 4. The day of the conference. I ran into Willow and Makoto. Willow was at the conference, because it concerned the fate of the Liu Group. Naturally, Mr. Liu had sent Willow to attend, and because my research with Professor Anna would directly determine the future development of the industry for the next few years, Makoto had his arm around Willow's shoulder, scanning the area. Then he said to me, "Bro, who did you come in with?" From his expression, it was clear that he thought I was just some overseas pretender. He probably thought that even getting into the venue was thanks to someone else's help. I ignored him, but he continued to provoke me. "If you have a new girlfriend, show her to us. Congratulations." "Really, George?" Anna's voice suddenly cut through the tension. The next second, she arrived at my side. She softly said, "Hello, I'm George's supervisor. May I ask who you two are?" I turned and saw her delicate profile. Just like before, cold and distant. She never interfered with others' personal matters, let alone greeted anyone. Worried that she might be offended by Willow, I quickly responded, "This is my ex-girlfriend and her current boyfriend." After hearing this, the soft look in Anna's eyes quickly turned into cold shards of ice. She softly said, "George, the meeting is about to start. Just like we agreed before, we need you to lead the way." This kind of occasion was nothing new for me. I was familiar with it by now. Willow, confused, asked, "Wait, what are you going up there for?" It was laughable. Liu Group had gained its foothold in the industry thanks to my research, but Willow didn't even remember what achievements I had made. She didn't even remember that my supervisor was a renowned overseas scholar who had been invited to this very conference. I didn't even look at her as I turned and walked away. Makoto, who had been silent until then, followed me, calling out from the audience, his voice calm as he said, "Bro, what are you trying to prove by doing this? That you're stronger than me? Don't think too highly of yourself." The lights of the conference hall cast a sharp line between us. I looked at his face, which twitched slightly from his forced smile, and said each word deliberately, "Kid, did you lose your mind?" As soon as the words left my mouth, the lights in the hall went out. A brilliant spotlight shone down from above. I stood in the light, unable to see Makoto's expression. As Anna had said, everyone makes mistakes. Maybe I was blinded by some foolish impulse. Maybe I was too naive, but I would never give up control again. Not in my career. And certainly not in my relationships. I had started out humble, studying abroad to prove my abilities to Mr. Liu, so he would approve of my marriage to Willow. I had given Liu Group my first batch of academic results, which allowed the company to rise to prominence. Yet, I had become the subject of ridicule. Now, I would never make that mistake again. That evening, I became the most sought-after figure in the eyes of many companies. Ivy League graduate, returning medical doctor, supervised by Professor Anna. The combination of these accomplishments had me mingling and exchanging pleasantries all night. During the tea break, I stepped out of the restroom. Willow was already waiting outside. She said, "George, long time no see." For a moment, it felt like I had gone back in time. She was just like I remembered, standing at the airport exit, smiling as she said, "George, long time no see." But when the beautiful expectations were shattered by reality, only the broken pieces remained. Pieces that were downright disgusting. I replied flatly, "Miss Liu, that line is a bit too late, don't you think?" Willow's face flickered with a trace of grievance. She bit her lip and said, "Last year, the Liu Group went through a crisis. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. My father had to mortgage the house and cars. I was so scared. George, I wasn't ignoring you. I wanted to talk to you, but you were so busy with your so-called experiments." Listening to her sudden outburst, I mocked, "Are you blaming me?" I stiffened my face and said, "You were the one who brought up breaking up. And you were the one who said we'd talk again later." "Willow, why go through all this? Is it really that hard to admit you couldn't wait?" She lowered her head, unable to meet my gaze. She said softly, "Can we get back together?" Without thinking, I slapped her across the face. Willow's head was thrown sideways, a five-fingered mark appearing on her fair cheek. I was laughing in anger and asked, "Willow, are you a slut? Are you going to die if no one loves you? When you're in trouble, you run to a man's arms. If your dad can't be relied on, you come to me. And if I'm not around, you turn to someone else. Should I get you a ghost marriage if you really want to die?" Willow kept her head down. Then, out of nowhere, Makoto rushed over and pushed me. He angrily yelled, "George, how can you hit her? When she took sleeping pills to kill herself, where were you?" "Enough." Willow interrupted him. "Willow, don't hide this from him." Makoto roughly pulled Willow's hand away, his voice harsh. At that time, when I saw her so helpless, I was heartbroken. I felt so sorry for her, you know, right? How could you be such an irresponsible boyfriend? During that time, I was the one staying with her, taking care of her, cheering her up, and taking her out for walks. And you were overseas pretending to be important, coming back with everyone fawning over you. Do you think you're some sort of prince? So everyone has to follow your lead? I sneered. Did I cause her depression? Did she ever tell me about it? And you're really laughable. What exactly did your so-called companionship solve? What are you even worth? She's standing here today because my research saved Liu Group and helped them out of their crisis. Now Liu Group is thriving. And what do I get out of it? Makoto gritted his teeth and said, "What did you get? Don't you know what you're like tonight?" I replied, "Of course I know exactly what I'm like tonight. It's what I deserve. She's alive today thanks to the doctors. What do I owe to you? The doctors worked tirelessly to save her. So why didn't she marry one of them?" Makoto's face turned beet red, as if he had been greatly humiliated. He shouted, "She has depression. Do you know that?" I replied impatiently, "How many times are you going to repeat that? Are you a broken record?" I said, "If she's sick, get her help, but don't come at me." In that moment, Makoto, furious and about to attack me, was stopped when Willow grabbed his arm. She said softly, "Stop it. I know in my heart who's been good to me." Those words were like a needle, stabbing straight into my heart. The MO Medical Center is located at a high latitude, with snow year-round, and the night temperatures often drop below freezing. I worked tirelessly, moving between the lab and dorm, under the cold, all night long. 2 years of hard work went into research that I gave to the Liu family for Willow. She said she knew in her heart who treated her well. I was beyond furious. I gritted my teeth and said, "Willow, a dog has eaten your conscience." Willow ignored me, and, holding Makoto's arm, softly said, "Makoto, let's go home." Chapter 5. When I pushed open the glass door to the rooftop, it made a bit of a loud noise, startling a few people who turned to look at me. Anna was already sitting there. She tilted her head and said, "First time seeing you lose your temper." I rubbed my forehead, trying to suppress the frustration, and said, "Just ran into some trouble. Nothing major." Anna blinked, sizing me up from head to toe. She said, "It's fine. You don't have to hold it in." I turned my gaze towards the city nightscape. The lights were scattered like stars, and the traffic was endless. A gentle breeze brushed against the collar of my shirt, and the noise slowly faded away. That bitch Willow. What the hell? She's so shameless. I suddenly cursed out loud. Anna smirked, handing me a glass of wine. I clenched my trembling fist, took the glass, and downed it in one go. Anna's voice softened. "Do you remember the first time you came to my lab?" I scratched my head. "Yeah. I made a mess of everything and even made the senior cry." Anna rested her cheek in her hand. "I know your studying abroad wasn't voluntary. According to tradition, I would have kicked you out." She paused, then said seriously, "But later, you blended in so well that I couldn't refuse your application. Everyone has their own path to walk. You can't stop someone from getting off halfway, can you? George, you don't belong here." I sat in the wicker chair, staring blankly at Anna. I said, "Professor, I thought you were going to tell me to think it through." She never pried into anyone's personal matters. This was probably the most personal thing she had ever said to me. Anna's almond-shaped eyes locked on mine, staring seriously for a while, her expression unreadable. Suddenly, the wind picked up. She softly spoke again, looking down. "Sorry, I have my selfish reasons." Those words got swept away by the wind. The tip of them brushed against my heart. I shivered slightly. The academic conference ended before 10 o'clock. When I walked out of the conference hall holding my briefcase, I noticed a crowd had gathered in front of the door. There was a faint smell of ash in the air. As I stepped down the stairs, I saw that someone had placed a fire pit in front of my car. The flames had just gone out, and several photos were lying in the pit. Only half a face remained, burned beyond recognition. It was my photo. The crowd around me started discussing. Who did this? Such bad luck. This is like cursing someone to death. On the windshield and the body of the car, someone had written in bold red paint, "The bastard deserves to die." The culprit had chosen the brightest red, writing it several times across the front windshield and the car body. As people realized I was the car's owner, they started pointing at me. Someone said, "He looks like such a decent person, but he's hooking up with other people's wives." No surprise. Actually, there are quite a few people like him. They seem so proper, but they're actually hypocrites. People like him don't even deserve their achievements. Blood rushed to my brain instantly. Even though I had good manners, I couldn't tolerate having dirt thrown on me again and again. Through the crowd, I caught sight of Makoto's calm and courageous gaze. Where did he get the courage and confidence from? I pushed through the crowd and charged straight towards him. Makoto didn't expect me to act so quickly. He froze in place. The next second, I grabbed him by the collar, yanked him over, and slammed his face onto the car glass. I spoke coldly, "Clean it up." He was stunned for a moment, and after a brief silence, He started struggling. He shouted, "Let go of me. What are you doing?" I gritted my teeth and said, "What do you think I'm doing?" My fingers turned white as I held him down, and with my free hand, I dialed the police. The commotion attracted many onlookers, but before I could call, Willow's scream came from behind the crowd. "George, let him go." The urgency in her voice was something I had never heard before. Just as she got close, I kicked over the fire pit. The ash flew up, covering her. I snapped, "Where did my photo come from?" Willow didn't answer directly. Instead, with a calm yet defiant look, she said, "Hitting people is illegal. Do you believe I'll call the police right now?" I was speechless. Makoto quickly shouted in a trembling voice, "No, don't call the police. Willow, who are you really helping here?" I sneered. "You plan to act all righteous and send Makoto to jail, right?" Willow froze for a moment. Her brows furrowed. "George, use some reason. Why are you acting like a madman?" I asked. "Want to see something even crazier?" I took out the recorder. I pressed play. A recording of me and Willow started playing. I said, "Willow, is it really that hard to admit you can't wait any longer?" She replied, "Can we get back together?" I asked, "Willow, are you a slut?" Willow's pupils dilated, and she nervously looked at the dazed Makoto. She said, "Makoto, it's not like that." "I didn't mean it like that." Makoto's face turned pale as he gritted his teeth and said, "You still like George, don't you? How do you see me? A replacement?" I held the recorder, raised it between the two of them, and played the recording. "Can we get back together? Willow, are you a slut? Can we get back together? Willow, are you a slut?" Makoto finally broke down. He screamed, grabbed the recorder, smashed it to pieces, shoved Willow away, and turned to leave. Willow, injured, stood up, choking back tears. "George, you're so heartless." She finished speaking, crying as she chased after him, leaving behind a mess and a crowd that had gone as silent as rabbits. I scanned the crowd, said nothing, and got into the car. After a while, I covered my eyes and sighed deeply. Chapter 6. The surveillance camera at the entrance captured the entire process of Makoto damaging my car. Not only did he vandalize it with paint, but he also hammered a few dents into the hood. If I refused to settle, Makoto might be detained for a few days. But it would only be a few days. The compensation they offered was several times higher than expected. I sat in the mediation room, across from Willow and a furious Makoto. Makoto angrily signed the settlement agreement and handed it to me. The police officer said, "Mr. Ito, the parties involved have requested an apology from you." Makoto glared at Willow, gritting his teeth and said, "I will never apologize. Willow, maybe I'm not as important as your childhood friend. I can't stop you two from being together, but I have my own pride as a man. I will never bow to him." I was speechless. I said flatly, "Are you out of your mind? She and I ended things long ago." Willow pouted and then looked at me. "George, I've given you the money. Why are you being so petty? Why can't we just let this go?" I smiled. "Let it go? Since when does the victim decide that?" I pushed the settlement agreement back and said generously, "All right, let's just let it go. Add double the compensation, and I'll let it go." Willow's face turned red. She bit her lip. I interrupted. What? If you're going to be petty, you might as well make it worth something." Makoto slammed his fist on the table. "What? Just money? Fine. Liu's family has plenty of money." Willow was silent. In the end, they readily agreed. Miss Liu wasn't short of money. After all, the Liu family had made a fortune off my work, but at this point, I didn't care. Money was enough. As I walked out of the police station, Makoto, holding Willow, looked at her with eyes full of regret. "I'm sorry. I acted impulsively." Willow tugged at his sleeve and said, "It's not your fault, Makoto. It's all my fault for trusting the wrong person. I never expected him to be so vicious." It was raining outside. I stood under the eaves, staring at the curtain of rain, lost in thought for a long while. Honestly, it felt pretty meaningless. Over 10 years of affection, all gone in a matter of days. I frowned as my phone buzzed with a message. I opened it and froze in place. The message read, "I told you Makoto and Willow had something going on. A friend of mine found Makoto's Weibo. Here's a photo he posted last year during May Day. You and Willow probably hadn't broken up then." The photo showed Makoto in a bath towel, looking smug. He was holding a phone with his right hand, taking a selfie in the hotel mirror, while his left arm was wrapped around the slender waist of a woman wearing a mask. The caption read, "Met up with a junior, ready to party until dawn." Below, there were some enthusiastic comments. "Nice, bro. Been watching you two all the way. Go for it, big bro. Your wife's got a great figure." Makoto replied, "Of course, my wife can even do a split." I held the phone. The mist seeped into my bones. My hands and feet were ice cold. At the time, I had only been abroad for less than a year, and I hadn't even produced any results. Willow was already hooking up with Makoto. Later, the The Liu Group took my work and became the industry's top player. How dare she? Willow called out from behind me. With a cold tone, she said, considering we've known each other for so many years, you should consider collaborating with Liu Group. I took a step back, distancing myself from Willow. A wave of intense nausea rose from my stomach. I used all my strength to steady my voice. Calmly, I said, what if your boyfriend comes here barking like a dog? Makoto was about to lash out, but she quickly pulled him back and said, he won't. From now on, we'll only talk business. He won't bother you. Interesting. She still had the nerve to talk to me about business. Before today, I just wanted to erase everything with her, but now, I've changed my mind. I want to send her into the abyss. The rain was still falling. The sound of the soft rain was almost hypnotic. George. Willow called my name. I shook my head slightly and gave a faint smile. I asked, how much credibility do you think you have with me now? Willow pressed her lips into a tight line, remaining silent for a long time. I took out a sealed bag from my pocket, containing a silver ring, and tossed it into the rain at her feet. I said, this no longer serves a purpose for me. Back when she insisted I buy these silver rings, we were still in high school. The rings were simple. They were nothing compared to the one she wore on her ring finger now. We had worn them for years, and I had planned to give her a diamond ring when I got back to propose. But as always, life doesn't follow plans. Willow's gaze locked on the couple ring, her lips turning pale. How laughable. She seemed to suddenly remember something, and a trace of guilt appeared on her face. She bit her lip and said, George, brother. I replied, don't call me that. I took a step back, standing in the rain, the water soaking through my clothes. Willow took a step forward but stopped because Makoto was pulling her back. I smirked. Willow, stay away from me from now on. Chapter 7. When Anna and I got into the car and left, it seemed like Makoto and Willow were arguing. Makoto shoved Willow into the rain, yelling, don't you want to collaborate with your crush? Hurry up and leave. Don't bother me anymore. You're a rich young lady, and she's a PhD returnee. What the hell am I? I'm just a broke loser. What do I deserve from you? I can only wish you two stay locked up forever. The next moment, Willow collapsed to her knees, crying uncontrollably, and clung to his legs, pleading desperately. The umbrella fell to the ground. The rain poured relentlessly. Outside the police station, the two of them looked like drowned rats. Anna turned to me and said, you're still looking at them even though we're so far away. Aren't you afraid of car sickness? I pulled my gaze away with a blank expression and said, actually, I do feel a bit nauseous. She snorted and said, driver, please speed up. It was rush hour, and the traffic was heavy. The unspoken delay stretched out our time together. Anna suddenly spoke up, I'm going back tomorrow. Thanks for the gift. I really like it. Her words stunned me. I was frozen for quite a while. To be honest, I hadn't adjusted well since coming back. I often dreamt of being back in the lab. That place felt more like home. I sighed inwardly and said, please say hi to them for me. Anna blinked but didn't reply. After a long silence, she called out to me, George. What? At that moment, our eyes met. In each other's gaze, we saw the things we both held onto. Anna opened her mouth but didn't say anything. Instead, she smiled and said, I wish you all the best. I replied, thank you, and you too. The rain outside grew heavier, washing away those unspoken feelings. And soon, nothing could be seen anymore. After Anna left, I joined Liu's subsidiary company, Jinxing. 4 years, Jinxing had been suppressed because of the technology Liu held in its hands, and it could never lift its head high. On my first day at work, I saw a familiar face. How is it you? I had just entered the office when I saw someone I knew. Alicia walked over, her fingers brushing over the folds of her black knitted skirt, and the loose hair at the back of her head smelled faintly of cedarwood. She said, Senior, long time no see. She was my junior, outstanding grades, a wealthy family background. As the only daughter in her family, she took over her father's company after graduation. This connection made our communication smooth. Alicia poured me a cup of tea and said seriously, Senior, actually, you could consider taking an equity stake in the technology. I'll make sure you get the best return. She was sincere and offered quite a generous deal. Alicia, I said, looking at her seriously, I don't doubt your sincerity, but I won't be investing. She asked, why? Alicia frowned slightly and said, don't tell me you still want to cooperate with Liu. I smiled and interrupted, everyone wants to make money, but it's just not the right time. Alicia, do me a favor. Chapter 8. Recently, Makoto's social media updates had been frequent. Visited my future father-in-law today. I asked if I needed to prepare anything, and Willow said she'd help me. With a wife like her, what more could I ask for? Haha. My father-in-law is very pleased. I don't need to work hard anymore. Many people in the comments section were teasing him. Are you about to achieve financial freedom? Some others commented, laughable. Just a man living off his woman's money. Is that something to be proud of? Someone replied. The person above must still be too young. Didn't graduate from university. Reading thousands of books is not as good as traveling thousands of miles. And traveling is not as good as having a rich woman to support you. Another person commented. So what if he's living off her? Suggesting Ito the millionaire should write a guide for how to live off women. In this kind of praise and attention, Makoto flaunted his life day after day. Perhaps because I started working at jinxing and didn't receive any particularly good treatment. Word spread among peers. A little inquiry here and there would reveal that I often worked late into the night. Makoto started sending me messages. He said, "Bro, don't work too hard. You should go out more. If you get a girlfriend and end up exhausted, you'll earn money but won't have the energy to spend it. In the end, others will be spending your money, playing with your wife, and even beating your kids. How tragic would that be? I feel so guilty. I get to drive luxury cars and live in a villa without working. So comfortable. Actually, I really have to thank you. If it weren't for your research achievements, I wouldn't be able to live this good life." I ignored him completely. This continued for more than half a year. My career was at a standstill. Meanwhile, Makoto, relying on the soft living method, had accumulated quite a following. Now, whenever friends talked about him, they all praised him, saying he had some real skills. I gradually faded from everyone's attention. One ordinary Friday evening, Makoto's message came as expected. He said, "Big bro, Willow's pregnant, and it's mine. Thanks to your hard work, Lou's made money, and now I'm going to win the rich beauty and reach the peak of my life. Are you happy? Jealous?" He also sent a grinning emoji. I had explained to him many times that I had nothing to do with Willow, but he didn't believe me. Honestly, over the past 6 months, Makoto's mental state had taken a strange turn. Originally, he wasn't part of my plan. I had even warned him several times not to bother me again. But, sadly, kind words can't convince a stubborn ghost. A few minutes later, he bombarded me with messages. He said, "Don't you understand human speech? I'm going to be a dad. Why are you still bothering Willow? Willow is my wife. If I find out you're secretly meeting her again at night, I'll gladly live stream me beating you up." At the time, I was sitting across from Willow. I asked, "Are you pregnant?" Willow took a sip of red wine and frowned at me. "Yes." I smiled. "You should drink less wine. It's not good for your health." She nodded and continued reading her documents, pursing her lips in silence. I waved over the waiter and had them switch her drink to juice. While wiping my hands, I asked, "Since we broke up, where have you been? You haven't gone home." Willow didn't directly answer but instead asked, "Is this all Alicia said? This proposal seems incomplete." Indeed, I had been in private contact with Willow for the past 2 months, because jinxing was growing rapidly. Next month's bid made it Lou's strongest competitor. At a time when Lou's father was in a state of panic, I threw him an olive branch, saying, "Uncle, jinxing can't offer me much, and as you know, I have feelings for Willow. For this reason, I'd prefer to cooperate with you." He understood immediately and had Willow reach out to me for negotiations. I had known Willow for over 10 years, and playing the emotional card was easy for me. Our feelings reignited quickly. Every week, we met at a private members-only restaurant. I provided her with some intelligence to help Lou's deal with Alicia, but that was all. I had no intention of meddling in other people's relationships, nor would I ever let her stay out all night. Willow had complained more than once. She pouted and said, "If I had known this, you should have just cooperated directly with Lou's. Why make things so complicated?" I massaged my aching temples and said, "If I gave you the full proposal, jinxing would have sent me to prison." As I spoke, I absent-mindedly adjusted my handbag. I said, "I'll be right back. You should hurry and read through it." Chapter 9. As soon as I finished speaking, the door was suddenly slammed open. Makoto, leading a few burly men, rushed in without hesitation. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's him." He held up his phone, gritting his teeth, seemingly ready to tear me apart. It had been a long time since I last saw Makoto. He had lost a lot of weight and didn't look as suave or pleased as he did on camera. His eye sockets were sunken, and his cheeks were noticeably hollow. He looked visibly worn out. Before I could say anything, I was surrounded by the burly men. They began shouting, "Shameless! You dare touch my brother's woman! Are you tired of living?" Fortunately, I had chosen this place, and the security was top-notch. After a brief scuffle, the security guards had them under control. During the struggle, I scraped my skin a little. Makoto cursed loudly. "Come see this. Is there no law left? My wife's pregnant, and they're messing around here." I wiped the blood off my hands and looked at Willow. She had been curled up on the couch the whole time, silent like most women caught in an affair. It was as though it was only a man's battlefield. The fire would never reach her. I rolled up my sleeves and walked over, slapping Willow hard across the face. The slap rang out in the room. The whole place went dead silent. Willow froze, covering her face, staring at me in disbelief. I frowned and said coldly, "What are you looking at? If you want to keep the cooperation going, don't let this idiot pull this cheating drama again, or we'll all be done for." Makoto was still angrily shouting. He gritted his teeth and said, "If you have the guts, let me go and let's settle this one-on-one. I'll beat you to death, you bastard." It's almost laughable. When I was younger, I couldn't understand Willow. I just thought of her as a high and mighty goddess. I was happy to be her dog. Who would have thought that in just a few months, I'd see her for who she really was? She's selfish and self-centered, with no one but herself in her eyes. Seeing that she didn't move, I smiled casually and said, "Willow, don't forget, this is commercial crime. If we get caught, we'll end up in jail." Makoto was impulsive and hot-headed. He didn't care about that at all. All he knew was that if I was in the same room with Willow, things would flare up again, like a wild beast. Once he broke free from the security guards, he picked up a stick and smashed the TV in the room. But Willow, who had almost fallen into the abyss herself, did care. Her glamorous life couldn't end like this. For the next few minutes, I became a passive observer. Willow slowly walked over, and in the next second, she slapped Makoto hard across the face. Makoto stared at her, eyes wide in disbelief. His anger evaporated in an instant, replaced by disappointment and confusion. He hoarsely said, "Willow, what's going on?" A trace of regret flashed in Willow's eyes as she bit her lip and said, "Sorry, Makoto, Makoto's face turned pale. He looked at her deeply before turning around and leaving with his men. Not looking back, Willow turned her back to me, her figure desolate. After a long pause, she said, "George, I'm already pregnant with his child. This is the last time. After this, let's never see each other again." I picked up my briefcase and couldn't help but laugh sarcastically. Pregnant with his child? Don't make me laugh. She doesn't even know whose child it is. Every time we wrapped up early, she'd go with her girlfriends to places where everything was kept under wraps, returning home only late at night. When Makoto found out, she tried to shift the blame onto me, hoping I'd take the fall. In her dreams, I picked up my coat and brushed past Willow. I whispered, "Willow, you better start accumulating some good karma, build some virtue, otherwise, after you die, not even hell will have room for you." Chapter 10. Half a month later, the bidding began. Willow, however, caused a scandal. Makoto, as an influential blogger, came back after disappearing for half a month and directly exposed Willow, revealing the so-called affair between her and me. The online backlash was overwhelming. I wasn't spared either. Alicia said over the phone, "Senior, have you ever thought that this could ruin your reputation?" I looked at the photo Anna had sent me. She was standing in front of a snow-covered mountain, gazing at the sunrise. Her almond-shaped eyes were calm and gentle. I suddenly missed her a little. The paper calendar on my desk turned to a new page. I marked it with a check, then said, "No, I just hope that when Venus becomes the leader of the industry, the promises made to me will be fulfilled." Alicia responded. Of course, despite all the rumors about Willow and me, Alicia continued to believe in me. She said, "Maybe you should consider staying here." I replied, "If the opportunity arises, I will." In just a few days, public opinion had fermented rapidly. Even at work, people were pointing at me. I often found myself staring at the 19th floor of the office building across the street. That was where Willow worked. One day, she finally saw me. She waved at me. Soon, she called me. She said, "Makoto has been controlled by my father. It's time to release the clarification statement. As long as you provide an alibi that we weren't together, I will be cleared." I laughed. Why didn't she post it herself? Because she wasn't innocent, she just wasn't with me. I sat at my desk, lazily crossing my legs, the sunlight warming me. I replied, "Willow, I don't want to post it." Her voice tightened. "Why?" I answered. "Because I love you, don't I?" My tone was mocking. I said, "George is so foolish. Even after being betrayed once, he still wants to stay with Willow and act like a servant." These were the exact words she said last week while talking on the phone with her friend. I overheard it by accident. Willow wasn't exactly smart either. She was willing to believe that all men were controlled by their lower bodies like simps. That mindset was itself quite foolish. Willow's side went silent for a moment. Then she replied, "George, what do you want? If you help me, I can marry you." Her response amused me. I laughed and said, "What are you thinking? Have you forgotten you're pregnant with someone else's child?" She started to panic. She said, "George, please don't say that. You know I'm innocent." "No, I don't." I stood up and gently tapped the window. I said, "Willow, handle your own business." I hung up the phone and saw her glaring at me through the floor-to-ceiling window. I knew she was about to explode. When someone wants to vent their anger but has nowhere to do it, they're not far from losing their mind. This scandal caused huge losses to Lou's company and made Willow lose face. I refused to testify, and Alicia called the police, accusing Willow of conspiring with me to steal business secrets. In front of the police, Willow honestly admitted that she had been going out at night with her girlfriends, for example, to corrupt officials' clubs and the private homes of rich second-generation officials. I was next door and overheard the whole scene. This time, Makoto completely broke down. He slammed the medical report onto Willow's face. He yelled, "Willow, you're something. You really have no shame. Don't you know who your father is? And you call yourself a young lady? I think you're just a free." It wasn't one person, but several, all on the same day. The entertainment circle really is messy. I tried to zone out, staring vacantly, suppressing my desire to laugh. The police officer slapped the table, his face stern. "What's going on? Focus," I said. "I didn't do it," the officer asked. "Then why does she have your company's documents?" I replied. "I'm not sure about that." Soon, they found the footage of the day I secretly met with Willow. While I went to the bathroom, Willow opened my briefcase. She opened my laptop and inserted a USB drive. It was her who, through illegal means, obtained the business secrets. I had nothing to do with it. I was released without charge. It was raining again. As usual, it seemed like it always rained whenever I came to places like this. I preferred snow. Alicia was standing by the door, waiting for me, with a look of amusement on her face. She laughed. 7 or 8, senior. I really didn't know Willow was so messed up privately. It's outrageous. I would have thought she was filming a movie. Halfway through her laugh, she stopped and said, "Senior, can I ask, have you had a medical checkup?" I smiled and said, "Don't worry about me. You should think about how to make money." When I first entered medical school, the teachers told us to check for infectious diseases before getting involved with anyone. So for all these years, I had never rushed into the next step with her. Instead, I avoided a disaster. Makoto got seriously ill and was completely drained. The poor guy was slumped on a public bench, lost and disoriented. I didn't want to deal with him, but as I passed by, he called me. He asked, "How come you're fine?" I looked down, sighed, and handed him a business card from a friend in the infectious disease department. I said, "Stay strong. When Willow gets out, you'll have to support her." I choked up. "You'll need to take care of her." Then I covered my face, quickly turned, and walked toward Alicia, who was laughing hysterically. Behind me, I heard Makoto's furious scream. He almost hit me. Chapter 11. My agreement with Alicia was that I would invest in the company with my technical expertise, helping her turn it into the industry leader. In return, she would help me sabotage Liu's group. But I never expected Alicia to show such sincerity. She gave me the real data. As a result, Willow caused a loss of 20 million to Venus. Her original goal was to get Willow sent to jail. Commercial crimes, coupled with years of chaotic power and sex transactions, led to Willow's conviction. As they say, when the wall falls, everyone pushes. After I went abroad, the news about Willow's affair with Makoto was leaked online by someone with ulterior motives. Netizens were furious and said, "Makoto is the real jerk and cheap woman. They deserve to get sick. Good thing George is clever. If it were an ordinary person, they'd only swallow the bitterness." It had been a year since I learned the truth, and everything was finally settled. I booked a plane ticket and was ready to leave. Before I left, I went to visit Willow, a woman who had lost everything and was suffering from an incurable disease. Such a tragedy. She no longer had the radiant beauty she once had. She looked fragile, as if a gust of wind could knock her over. Her voice hoarse, she asked, "Are you satisfied, George? I never thought you'd be so heartless. I just didn't wait for you as we agreed, and now you're going to ruin me." She must have thought that her affair and playing with a simp's feelings wasn't worth death. I couldn't help but laugh. I said, "Willow, I'm also here to make money." "What?" Her eyes fixed on my face as she asked, "What do you mean?" I held the receiver close to my ear, enough for her to see every detail of my face. Then, I raised my eyes and gave her a mocking smile. I laughed and said, "I have to clean up the market. If Liu's group doesn't fall, how can I dominate the industry? How can I make money? Do you really think I'll be held back by feelings and fall apart?" Willow's pupils reflected my broad smile. I said, "Feelings? It's just a game. Willow, you're not worthy of being my partner. So, I'm sorry. I have no choice but to get rid of you." These were probably the most terrifying words Willow would ever hear in her life. Her pupils widened, and she slowly slumped against the glass. After a brief silence, she suddenly started banging on the glass and screaming like a madwoman, as if she wanted to tear me apart. I gently hung up the receiver, stood up gracefully, and left. From that day on, I became one of the largest shareholders of Venus. In the coming years, I would personally go to the US to build a bridge for domestic and international technical communication. In front of me was a vast blue ocean. The rotten fish and shrimp were bound to stay on the shore, heading toward their inevitable end. On the day I was about to leave, Alicia was at the airport, pulling my suitcase. "Senior, actually, I really like you," she said. She was proactive, always straightforward, And after I rejected her countless times, she still persevered. I smiled and asked, "Love or money? Pick one." She snorted and said, "Of course, money." She answered without hesitation. After saying that, we both laughed. I grabbed the suitcase and said, all right. Thanks for liking me, but I really have to catch my flight." Alicia stared at me seriously for a while, then suddenly stepped forward and wrapped her arms around my waist. She whispered, "George, have a safe trip." I nodded and said, "Looking forward to our next meeting." Then, she let go of me and playfully pushed me away, not allowing me to look back at her. A year later, standing in front of the MO Medical Center, I felt like I had gone back a few years. The first time I stood here, filled with longing for Willow and my hometown. Nothing had changed. The busy classmates, the casually made snowman, and the vast snow-covered plains that stretched for miles with no one in sight. It was snowing again. In this foreign land at a high latitude, spring seemed forever out of reach, but it was also here that I found my ideal. In the collision of human thought, I saw the light of science, and the hope for the continuation of human civilization. I rubbed my red, frozen cheeks and was just about to get closer when the large doors slowly opened. A tall, cold figure stood at the entrance. Her almond-shaped eyes broke into a gentle smile. In that moment, spring seemed within reach. Anna stretched out her hand and smiled at me. "George, welcome home."